So this is the segment where we talk about project management. So who here has managed a project? Okay, good. So you can answer this question. What is a project?
It's an engagement.
An engagement with a client. Okay, so that's a kind of a tautology. But anyway, somebody else? I like engagement. How else would you describe a project?
It has an end result.
Okay. Yeah.
Multiple steps along the way.
Yeah, an engagement always has like what I'm trying to get to. How else would you describe a project?
Finite resources.
Finite resources. Okay.
It's time-based.
Time-based. Yeah. Time plays a big deal and it's a big part of projects, and it's different than regular work that you do. Okay. I'm going to propose a definition of a project, and you guys think about what, if you like this. It's a problem that's scheduled for solution. It's a problem that is scheduled for solution. And when you think about it from our client's perspective, they don't hire us to do their normal work. They've got employees for that. They've got a structure for that. They've got all their tools for that. They hire us to do projects, right? Which to them are problems that they need a solution for, and they need it on a schedule, right? So that's what we're going to talk about for the next hour, okay? So everybody got your handout, big and bold? If you've ever read the books by Tufte on visual presentation, I encourage you we've got several copies floating around the office, pick those up. But he says, you know, placemats are better than slide presentations, so I'm doing a placemat today. So we're just kind of going to start in the middle here, then we're going to go up and around and kind of wander around it, and there's more stuff on the back, we'll get to that. So I just want you to think about this as a resource, right? So a project. All right, so let's look in that upper left-hand corner then. So we've got all kinds of terminology. So what's the difference between a task and a project? I'm going to get the door. You got it? What's the difference between a task and a project?
Task is part of an actionable step.
Yeah.
Towards completing the project.
Yeah, when you guys have built project plans in the past, you've identified tasks. So what do you need to identify a task?
Specific action.
Yeah, an action, who's going to do it, when does it start, when does it end, do they need particular tools or something to do the task, right? So you got to have all that stuff to define a task, right? And then here's one of the favorite words in consulting, right? We can just turn that off. It's not going to be, it's not going to be readable on the screen. Okay. So then what's a deliverable? Favorite word?
It's the final result.
Okay.
It's the handover.
It's the handover. It's a document, right? That's the delivery. It's the piece of paper we drop off. Wait a minute. What did we say a project was?
It's the solution to the problem.
Yeah. It's really tempting to think when you do projects that the deliverable is the document. That's wrong. The deliverable is the solution. The document is the artifact of it, right? But in most of our projects, the real deliverable is the client has come to a decision. It has reached a consensus on a question. It has decided to take a particular direction. Our document may memorialize that, but it's not the deliverable. You'll hear us misuse that word and talk about the documents as deliverables, but I want you to keep in mind when you're on a project, that is not the deliverable. The deliverable is really, what did the client want to get done? Okay? So deliverable. Milestones. What's a milestone?
Key points throughout the project.
Yeah. Who's done PMP stuff before? So what's the PMP definition of a milestone?
Critical event.
Right. It's a roll up. And when you write them, you want to typically write them in the past tense. We have accomplished a major element of the project to a particular level of quality or approval. That's how you write milestones. That's what milestones are. We got life cycle. What's a life cycle? Somebody over here hinted at it. Projects have a beginning, a middle, and an end. They're a little bit like novels, right? Novels always have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Our projects can turn into novels, right? Same sort of idea. So there's a life cycle to things. So you do some things at the front of projects, different things in the middle, and then different things at the end, right? And then there's scope. Scope is?
What's going to be done?
Yeah, what's got to get done. Now, one of the things to keep in mind as consultants is that, and the way Scott Madden does consulting, we are very collaborative about it. We do work with our clients. And we do that for a couple of reasons. One is we think we get a better result that way. We're very concerned with the deliverable being the agreed to decision, so we'll use words like buy-in. We want to make sure we get great buy-in. So to do that, we involve our clients in our work to a very high degree. So when we talk about scope, we have to be very clear about what it is that Scott Madden is doing and what our client is supposed to get done. All right? Now, who here has worked in that kind of environment where you had to, you know, the project had big work to do, you had a scope, somebody else had a scope. Anybody done that? How did that turn out? Any bumps along the way? What bumps?
Lack of communication and someone overstepping their bounds and someone
Yeah.
else not doing that.
Yeah, so you get overlaps, you get the client trying to do your work, you start trying to do the client's work. What else happens with scope?
I was saying in that process, there's contingencies, so
Mhm.
sometimes, you know, one person has to do something before you can do it.
Right.
If they can't,
Yeah.
slow it down.
Clients get derailed. Somebody who thought they were dedicated to this, a higher priority intervenes in the middle of the project and they get sucked off. So scope in our world is not static, it moves around. But we've got to be very conscious of always knowing and communicating what it is that we're getting done, what our clients are going to get done, how that all fits together to create the deliverable, all right? So that's scope. Stakeholders, Christian used that word. Basically, everybody who's got something to win or lose, gain or lose, as a consequence of the project. So stakeholders are hard because usually you have about half of them involved in actually doing the work, and there's another bunch of them that are kind of circling the project like a pack of hyenas, right? There's something there that either they want or they're absolutely terrified of. Right? And when you're working on projects, you need to keep your ears open and listening to the kinds of things that they're saying, because, you know, just like a pack of hyenas, they can attack at the weirdest moment in the project and really derail things, right? So our best approach is to make sure we're hearing everybody. Now, we're not trying to react to them all necessarily. There's a reason the project was set up the way that it was. But we need to keep our ears open for all of the stakeholders. And it's possible that on some projects, stakeholders emerge in the course of the project, and you have to stop and say, you know what, we really ought to bring them onto the team. They have a perspective that nobody understood when we started this. We need to bring them on, right? So it's not static, it can move around. So be aware of a stakeholders. Critical path, that's an easy term, right? What's critical path? Elizabeth, you hinted at it. Yeah. There's a sequence of activities, right, that forms the absolute minimum amount of time to get through the project. And if any of those particular milestones slip, then we're in trouble. I will say that we don't do a whole lot of critical path modeling in our projects. We tend to be very milestone oriented, but moving milestones is a big problem, because you've usually gotten a bunch of executive organizations and groups aligned to meet and discuss and be ready. So those things tend to be very difficult to move if something's going wrong in the work preparing for that milestone. Okay? So
How
then,
siloed are the projects or the paths, I guess, if you will? Because if you're not going in a straight line, then it sounds like each person has their own work stream that doesn't.
it really depends. I would suggest that Scott Madden projects are not necessarily that siloed. When you work on things, particularly starting out as associates as well as interns, you might be supporting several different work streams. You might have, on the one hand, you're doing an analysis for somebody, and that's got to fit into a series of dates for milestone support, and then you might be participating in meetings and taking notes and doing that kind of thing, or doing, the regular kind of project reporting, how's the schedule, what's the list of key items. So you might be working on multiple streams simultaneously. Okay, so you're going to get a chance to look across projects. You're not going to be slotted in, sitting at a desk, grinding away on a spreadsheet, and that's the only thing you do. It might happen, but that's really unusual for a Scott Madden project. We tend to want to get you broader exposure on projects than that. Good question. Okay, last big term, float and slack.
Flexibility.
Yeah, we don't have any of that. No, seriously, in Scott Madden projects, one of the things we wrestle with is because the work itself is often poorly defined. This is not like building a house or painting a room. People, when your partners and your engagement directors are mapping out the milestones, they're kind of taking their best educated guess about what's where. And you'll find segments of the project that actually have negative slack, right? So be ready for that. Your best defense against negative slack is to think really hard about all the tasks around those milestones and plan backwards, right? Identify it early when you really are jammed up. We've had cases where we've had to have, if you're planning backwards from the event, well, we had to have management reviews before we were actually able to get the teams to their first working meeting. It's like, well, that's not going to work. That's completely backwards, right? But it was because of the overall schedule we had committed to, so we had to rethink how to do the work to get the deliverable. Okay, so float and slack. You'll hear those terms some. All right, we touched on project life cycle over there. So this is one that you'll see a lot in corporate and shared services projects. You'll talk about identify, plan, execute, close. You'll also hear other life cycles like current state analysis, gap analysis, future state, implementation planning, right? Those are two really typical models of how we do project work that you'll hear over and over here at Scott Madden. So, and you can read the stuff that's on that slide later, or there should be enough information. You can go find all this on, what's our beautiful system called? Yes, and I see our little gnome friends here can help you if you get in trouble, right? We got new experts here. We can always use those, right? So just be aware that as you're working on projects, it's important to know which phase you are in, right? If you're in the planning phase, your tasks look very different than executing, right? How important is planning versus executing? Yeah. I think that's right. Who here has had to paint a room in a house? Yeah. How'd it go? If you could do it over, how would you do it differently? I'd hire a painter. Okay, I get that. That's off the table. That's off the table. Well, if you still have to do it yourself, how would you do it? How would you do it differently?
Think before I start putting paint on the wall.
Hey, there you go. It's so tempting just to crack the can and start whapping the paint on the wall, isn't it? How should you do it? First, move the furniture, drape everything. You gotta, tape it off, wash the walls, sand the walls, fill in all the cracks. It just feels like it's all prepped, doesn't it? It's like I still haven't even gotten close to the paint can yet. All this stuff to do, and then I paint at the very end. Right, so the painting is actually a very small part of the total project. It's all that prep work that makes the difference, right? Because if you do it the other way around, you got paint on stuff, you're trying to get it off the furniture, get it up out of the carpet, and the wall is splotchy and there's bumps and cracks that could have been filled in but you didn't, and you're just not really happy with the job. So I encourage you in your project life to resist the temptation to jump into the work. Take the time to plan it first and really think about what needs to get done. Now, I'm not also going to suggest that you're not going to be pushed to start the work before you feel comfortable. That's going to be part of project life. So get used to the idea that everybody wants everything now. But you need to work as individuals to create space for you to do the planning that you need to do in order for it to be a good job. And when you lay your plan out and say, I can't do this thing that you want in the amount of time that you've given me with the resources that I have, then you got to raise your hand and say, I can't solve this. I either need more time, I need more resources, right? Or I need to change the scope of what I can get done. As a consultant, what is our number one inventory item as a business? People. It's number two. Time. What's ruthless about time?
Never enough.
Never, it's always expiring. They made the joke about the cigarette was the perfect consumer product because once you lit it, it consumed itself. Didn't matter if you were sucking on it or not. It was going to burn itself up in the ashtray and you'd have to light another one. Time is kind of similar for consultants. It's our number one resource. 24 or 48 hours, it's amazing what we can get done. You get inside that window, things get really ugly if suddenly we start missing dates and so forth, or we show up with incomplete work or work that's not at the quality level that's expected. So time, it's both your best friend and your worst enemy. So manage it very carefully, right? Don't lose track. All right, that was project lifecycle, project management, and PMO. What's a PMO?
Office that retains how the organization conducts its project management.
Exactly. So we have a lot of clients who do a lot of projects, and they do them all differently every single time because they rely on the one project manager to do it. So they design everything, and then that project's over and they throw it all away or lose it, or they have another project with a different manager who wants to do it completely differently. And so then you reorganize all around that. So we have clients who have established PMOs because they want to have standard tools, standard processes, standard reports, right? It makes a lot of sense. Let's create this as a competency. So sometimes when we get involved with clients, we'll need to integrate into their PMO way of doing things. They'll have all this stuff ready for us. In other cases, on longer term projects, particularly some of the larger corporate and shared services projects, or even some of the bigger energy projects, we will be the PMO, right? So we'll have a number of projects and be responsible for the consistency of the approach and the staffing and the reporting and all the things that you would expect out of a project management office, because the client actually hires us to do that for them, because they realize they don't have the resources. All right, so there's project life with a project manager. That's different than PMO. And when you start to do work at a client, it's important to make sure you understand which one you're in. Because if you're in the if you're there to do PMO work, what do you say to things like scope creep and so forth? Is that different than if you're on a project? Didn't say that well. If you're on a PMO, what's your scope? The process itself, as opposed to a project where you're doing the work. What's the number one temptation of being in a PMO? I'm going to go do the project work. I'm going to get sucked into doing the project work. Well, as a PMO, you don't have enough resource to do the project work. Maybe a little bit of it, but not all of it. So it's really important as a PMO to know if that's your role, to be able to stop and say, no, we need to resource that as a project. The client needs to show up with resources. Hey, we've got people on the beach. You could, stroke a check. We could get some more folks out there for you. Or you can find people in your group to do it, but that's not the PMO's job, right? The PMO's job is to point out that thing needs to be resourced, okay? All right, moving down to the lower left, let's talk about, what do we say there? The triple constraint. I think it's actually a misnomer because it's actually 4 there, and if anybody's worked in a construction environment, there's actually 5. But I don't know how to write a 5-dimensional kind of thing, so I don't want to make it a pentagram. So triple constraint, we've talked about this. It's scope, what are we supposed to get done? It's time, how much calendar time do I have to get it done? And then cost, right? Or resources. How much resource do I have? Why do we want to represent those 3 as a triangle? Why is the triangle the figure we want to use?
They all interact with each other.
Yeah. Think back to your geometry days. What happens when you change the length of the leg of a triangle?
It affects the other side.
It does. The other sides have to change. Otherwise, it's no longer a triangle. It's some weird figure that isn't even closed anymore. So why does that matter to us when we think about projects?
The more time you spend could increase the cost.
Yeah. So suddenly that scope thing gets longer. Well, what does that mean in terms of my time or cost? Could. So I could keep the cost the same, but it's going to take me a lot longer, right? Somehow those other legs have to react to the fact the scope has changed, right? Or the schedule is shortened, right? Now what has to happen? Well, I either got to dump some scope or put more resource on it. Something's got to change in that triangle to keep all the legs connected. So when you're working on a project, it's important to always ask the question, right? Have I got the triangle? Does the triangle make sense to me, right? And if you're in trouble, right, you're thinking, I can't get these legs to connect. I can't get the scope, the time, and the cost to work for me. I'm going to have a problem with that milestone. What do you do?
Raise your hand.
Yes, you raise your hand. Because if you sit there silent, what are you spending? Time. Time is slipping away. That calendar is just, every day it's just clicking and clicking and clicking. And as you're compressing that amount of time, what are you doing with your options to solve your problem? You're just throwing them out the window. Yeah, you know, there's a 20, there's 100, you know, whatever. You get right down to the very end and you don't make it. What's the first thing your engagement director is going to say? Why didn't you say something earlier? Okay? So always be thinking about all three. Now, there's actually two other dimensions. One is quality. Our quality is stellar. Our work looks different than the things the client does. It looks different visually, right? Its spelling and its grammar is impeccable. The format that we use, right? We use the format, we stick to it. We don't mess around with the fonts. We don't do the things that our clients do because it's expeditious for them. We are creating something that communicates the fact that we have really thought this through. This is a really good answer, right? So that dimension of quality is there. There's also an intellectual dimension to the quality. It's important that the work is done correctly. I'm on a project right now where we had to score a bunch of routes where they're going to run fiber optic cable. And the client had a scoring scheme that they put forward that was terrible. In fact, it was mathematically incorrect. And these are electrical engineers. And I'm thinking, how can they do this? But they didn't understand how to normalize weights on categories. So they put a tool together that doesn't work. Well, guess what? We have to go back, we have to go in and fix that and propose essentially a second tool and say, no, we can try to score it there, look at the issues, let's do this instead, right? Our work looks different because it makes sense and is presented really, really well to our clients. So quality is really key. What's the last one, though, when you think about projects? So we got these three on the triangle. We got quality, which for Scott Madden is exemplary, but there's a fifth one that we always want to keep in mind. It doesn't hit us a lot because we work in offices, and what is that? Who here has worked on a construction project? What's rule number one on a construction project? Where's your PPE? Where's your personal protective equipment? Where's your helmet, right? Safety, 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 right? So for us as consultants, right, that means you're safe in your car. You're not doing stupid stuff in a car. You're not speeding to get to a meeting because you've left in plenty of time. Or if you're stuck, you're calling and telling somebody, I'm going to miss. You're not doing silly things, right? Airplanes, I don't know what you do with airplanes. They are what they are. On the client side, it's really tempting to get up on a chair and try to fix something or pick up a big piece of furniture and try to move it or whatever. Do you realize that if you hurt yourself doing that, you count as a lost time, potentially a lost time accident on their safety records? If you're working in a power plant and you're working with high energized equipment or, you know, all the stuff that they have to deal with, the really important safety stuff, right, where you can lose hands and feet, right, or maybe even kill somebody, and some consultant does something stupid in an office and it blows your safety record for the year, how pissed are you going to be? So keep it in mind, right? Keep your workspaces clean. Keep stuff up off the floor. It's easy to put bags where people walk, they trip, they fall, they break their nose, right? Think about safety in terms of what you're doing outside the client. We had a situation this year where we had 2 folks out for a run in the early evening and got stuck up by an armed robber, right? Pay attention. Be really careful, right? Keep safety in mind, all right? That's part of our project life as well. Okay, so let's talk to something happier. Recipe for success, right? I think we've probably gotten some of these already. So we got, we're on time, we're on budget, and we've done it with the quality, the full functionality wherever promised, right? So that makes sense. It also means that, anytime we've come up with risks or something like that, we've mitigated them early, kind of a no surprises sort of environment, right? We want to meet and exceed expectations, right? So what would you say are the kind of the keys to making all that stuff happen? I'll suggest one, and I think this one is you'll hear this from Chris Philopoulos if you work with him. He'll say, visualize the end product ASAP. Now, when he says end product, he's thinking of primarily he's going to drive you toward the deck. What's on the pages? What are the tables? What is the series of arguments that you're going to present in the material? What's the documentation, right? I encourage you as people working on projects, though, to back away from that and do something in addition to it. You got to do that. Chris will insist on it, and that's right. I also want you to back up, though, and say, what does the client want to achieve, right? I need to know what that looks like, right? Because if I know what that looks like, then I'm even smarter about how I build the materials that go behind that. But you can't start too early about figuring out what that is, right? And you can't also assume that once you've figured it out the first time that it's static. It will change, right? Because the client is learning along with us as we're doing the projects, right? And there's a very good chance that they're going to adjust what they actually want in the middle of the project, and we're going to need to react to that. So again, we won't understand that if we haven't first visualized the end product, right? So go out to the end, visualize it in 2 dimensions. A, what's the document look like? And then B, what result does the client actually want to achieve? Okay, so visualize, all right? Plan backwards. Everybody done the backward planning thing, right? So if I've got to show up on this date with all this stuff done, well then, okay, that means I have to have reviewed it with the client team the week before that, because that'll give me time to incorporate their changes and get it ready. Well, that means I got to have reviewed it with the Scott Madden team and partner maybe the week before that. You just work backwards, say, oh, I should have started on that yesterday. Dang. That's usually the way that works. So, but plan backwards. Always be planning backwards from those dates. It'll really help. Now, the temptation here is to squeeze stuff. You're going to do a back plan and go, I should have started last week. Oh, I'll just squeeze this phase. Yeah, be really careful with that. If you're going to squeeze it, you better know exactly how you're going to cut the time down. Otherwise, you're just kidding yourself. Okay? That's the be realistic but push, right? Expect to work long hours to get this stuff done, but let's also be realistic. And you know what? There's a lot of places where you can't get the client to cycle something in a week. Like, forget it. They're not going to do it. All right? So don't write a plan that presumes that they're going to do it. That won't work. We got to do something else, right? And if we're in the middle of something and we've planned it incorrectly and we've now come across this, what's the worst thing to do? Yeah, exactly. Not raise your hand. Say, I think we got a problem with this review cycle. Right? Raise your hand. Time is our friend. It's our one inventoriable asset. All right? Be careful when you're thinking about plans with things like schedules. So it's really nice to know what's the school schedule for the client where you're working. When is school's going to be out? Right? When's a vacation week? Right? Because you're going to have clients disappear, as they should. Right? They've got other commitments. They're not just here to work. Holidays, vacations, take all that stuff into account. Allow time for soak time. It can be really hard. That's one of the things that we're tempted to slice out of projects early. But sometimes it's important just to think about things. If you work on projects with John Kerner, anybody met John? You met John? Okay. He does a lot of our IT work, right? Former CIO, 10 years experiences in that role. He likes frameworks. He likes taking the client problem and putting it into framework A. And you work real hard to get into A, and then say, okay, I want to try this framework next. You're like, what? I thought we were going to proceed. No, we're going to do this one next. You'll put it into B. You'll grind on B and get that done. He'll say, yeah, let's try this one over here. You may go through 3 or 4 frameworks with him, and you're like pulling your hair out. It's like, when do we get on with the project? Actually, you are getting on with the project. In his world, for his clients and his problems, phrasing the situation in just the right way is the key, right? So lots of soak time for John, lots of work time to produce these different frameworks in order to figure out what is the best answer for the client, all right? So soak time. Seek review, we've talked about that a little bit, right? Don't wait until the end. Who else do you ask for input on your project? I'm bouncing around. Let's see if you're paying attention. Who are some of your best resources for project insight and intel and?
Somebody who might have worked on a project there before.
Yeah, you guys are, right? I asked around and said, well, if some senior associate said, well, if you could go back in time to when you were starting with Scott Madden, what piece of advice would you like to give yourself, right? Something that you would do differently. And I got a really resounding network. It's really important to get to know people inside the firm, to know what they know, to know what projects they've worked on, to know what they know about partners or directors or anybody else who's leading, know about clients. You just can't discount the value of having that network inside Scott Madden. Who has worked on an Excel formula for like an hour and been unsuccessful in making it do what you want it to do? Yes. Okay, who has then picked up the phone and called somebody who knows more about Excel than you do, and they solve it in, I'm going to say, a minute? Yeah, I'm guilty. Okay, that's a great example of network. Know who to call with that question. You know, call them, email them, text them, whatever makes sense. Don't sit and stew on the thing yourself. You're not winning any prizes for that. Use your network. All right? And in time, you're going to discover that you're going to become a network resource as well within the firm. All right? So network, network, network. Okay. We'll go back on track here. So talk about recipe for success, project management pointers. Let's talk about project roles. Let's talk about the client. Who's the client?
I mean, it could be not only the company, it could be like the person you're having to work with.
Mm-hmm. The company's too general. We don't really work for AP. We say we work for APS, but we really don't. On your projects, I'm going to suggest there are 2 clients. You're very often going to find a project manager client, the person that you're working with day to day to make things happen on the project. Very often that is not the ultimate client. The ultimate client usually has a C in front of their title, right? And they probably sit on a steering committee or something like that. Right? That's the ultimate client. And it's very easy to get confused that the project manager is the one who's always setting the agenda, right? Or they're the ones that you're trying to respond to. Yes and no. Yes, they need to be satisfied, but that ultimate client is actually probably that person in that C, has that C title or at least an EVP title we're really doing the work for. If you want to find the client, best thing to do is to find out who's writing the check for the consulting services. Find the economic buyer. And that's most likely your client. So it's their expectations we need to meet, right? Ultimately, it's there. They've got somebody in between, right? Their day-to-day project manager, but ultimately it's that individual who's going to set the scope and quality expectations, right? So that's who you need to be aware of and be asking questions about. Now, as consultants on projects, you will probably not interact with this individual much at all, right? That's going to be reserved for your engagement director or your partner. So those kinds of questions you aim at the partner and say, tell me more about, help me understand, right, this individual, right, and what they're looking for in the project. So, all right, client. So then we got client team. I think we talked about those. Those are all the folks who are going to show up from the client organization to get stuff done. And you're going to find a wide variety of motivations and skill levels and so forth. So just get ready, right? Half the time you're going to be a cheerleader, half the time you're going to be a taskmaster. Do not underestimate the amount of time you will spend chasing people to do things that they said they were going to do in the meeting. 24 hours before it's due, they haven't even started on it, right? Adapt to the rhythm of the place and begin to anticipate just how much pushing or guiding do you need to do. Yeah.
So recent, to that point, on a recent project, there was someone we were interfacing with on a regular basis. She was who we went to get information and data that we needed to perform our assessment. And we had sent her an email saying we need this information. And then 24 hours later, she came back and said, can you describe it to me again? We told her, described it, answered any follow-up questions. Said, okay. And then 24 hours later, she came back to us and said, can you write an email and send it to me so I can send it out to our folks so that we can get this information for you. So at that point, we lost 2 days.
Right.
Getting information that probably could have taken 5 or 10 minutes. So, very true.
Yeah. Do not make the mistake of believing that your clients are as motivated to do this work as you are. Now, in some cases, it's because they're truly just not motivated to do it, and that's okay. More typically, what it's easy for us to forget in project land, right, is that while we have one thing to do, we have this project, we have one focus, this is it. They have dozens, right? We see one little sliver of their work life. We have no idea or no visibility into the majority of it. So we have to be very attuned to listening to the pressures that they're under as well, right? And their competing priorities, right? And make sure that that's integrated into our thinking about how to get this work done. So I encourage you to be sensitive to the fact that the people that we work with are not motivated like us, right? They have lots of competing priorities. So factor that into your planning, okay? All right, so now we talk about Scott Madden role. So those are clients. So we've got an engagement director. Typically, who's going to be the engagement director? Partner, that's right, partner. So partners are in charge of, or responsible, or accountable for the client relationship, the overall quality and conduct of the consulting work, quality and client satisfaction, the buck stops with them, right? Contract management, if there's any discussions about scope extensions and money and so forth, the partner is in charge of that. Invoice approval, their name goes on the invoice. They are legally liable for the truthfulness of that invoice, right? And then all billing decisions belong to the engagement director. Now, when I started with Scott Madden the first time 20 years ago, partners typically had one project at a time, sometimes 2, which meant they were on site all the time, right? That is no longer the case. You will be on projects. Frequently, the partner is only there 1 day a week, 1 day every other week, right? So knowing that their time is limited physically on site and on the project, what do you need to do when they're on the project? What do you need to be ready for? Right, you need to be really well prepared to use their time efficiently, right? And they're going to be so busy, they're not going to be able to plan it well themselves. So it's important to know what their schedule is when they're going to be here, know what decisions they need to make, anticipate what information they're going to need to make those decisions, have all that stuff ready for them, right? If they need help getting meetings set up, you're going to help them get those meetings set up with clients, whatever that is, but be prepared to use their time very efficiently because there's not a ton of it, okay? So be ready for that, okay? Now, the person you are going to interact with a lot on the team is going to be the project manager. So typically in Scott Madden, who's that going to be? Yeah, directors or managers, people like me, right? So we have a big role to play in terms of the consulting. It's a little bit lower level. It's a little more tactical. It's about execution and delivery. But your project manager is also going to be responsible for the quality of the client relationship. If something starts to go wrong, the partner is going to look at the project manager and say, what's happening, right? So it's important that, of course, we're getting our work done on time and scope and everything else, It's also important that if you're hearing things from your client that leads you to believe that something's going wrong with the project, somebody's not happy, right? It could be one of those stakeholder hyenas circling outside. Get that information in the hands of the project manager, right? They may not do anything immediately, but they need to be aware of that kind of stuff because they're accountable for those things, right? They're going to be responsible for the organization and planning of the project, right? So when you actually get down to putting the project schedule together and who's working on which tasks when and so forth, that's going to be something that they're going to do. They're going to manage the budget, right? The consulting budget to get the work done. Schedule management, T&Es, sometimes they'll approve them, right? Those are the kinds of things that they do on the team. All right. So the final point on that slide on the lower right-hand corner is you got to know who's in what role. So you got to know who the client project manager is versus the actual client. You got to know on the Scott Madden team, well, who's the engagement director and who's my project manager? And it's completely legit to ask all those questions. Okay. So expectations for you guys coming on to projects, you can see them there. Be prepared. If you show up and say APS who, right, that's probably not a good start. So there's lots of resources to learn basics about our clients, right? Scott Madden team background. All the consultant resumes are available on SID, right? You can go research who's on, once you know who's on your team, you can go find out something about them. Heck, you can even send them an email and say, I understand I'm joining your team. I'm really excited. Could I find 10 minutes to talk to you about what we're going to be doing, right? Project background. Gee, this is a human resources call center implementation. We've probably done a couple of those in the past. Maybe I should read up on it, right? Find what resources are available. Maybe I should start looking for project plans for those things so I kind of understand what the beginning, middle, and end of these things look like, right? And then so I can figure out which stage are we in, right? Be on time. Who's been late to the airport? Is it fun? It is not fun. It's really not fun when the partner's on the plane and texting you, where are you? Right? And you're like, yeah, I missed the flight. Yeah, don't do that. Right? So some people think of cutting travel short as kind of sport. I encourage you not to play that game because the benefits of cutting it short never outweigh the risks and the downside of being late. So if we're going to have a meeting at 10 o'clock in a room, what time do you show up? Yeah, 9:45 is pretty good because what do you want to do? Yeah, I'd like to set it up, yeah. Particularly with all the AV gear that we've got these days, right? I've been in meetings where the clients don't even know how to work the phones, okay? So never assume that the room is set up correctly, that there's a telephone in there to have a conference call, that you can connect to the overhead projector. You got to be early, you got to test all that stuff out. Ideally, if you know what room it is and you can get in there the night before and test all that stuff out so you know how to work it, that's being prepared, okay? So be prepared, be early, meetings and phone calls, be dressed appropriately. Everybody here looks good, I hope that's not an issue. Business casual is hard though, right? It used to be easy, at least for guys, you know, jackets, ties, that was simple, right? So it's a little more complex. It gets more complex too if you're in an environment like a fulfillment center or a power plant. If you show up dressed like we are today, that's bad. You should be in jeans and a t-shirt so that you fit in, you look appropriate. You don't look like those consultants, right? Because what happens when people see consultants show up? Pardon me?
It's very like us versus them.
Yeah, yeah. There's often very much a flavor of they're here to cut people. This is a staff reduction exercise. So how's the level of cooperation go when suddenly everybody believes you're there to reduce staff? Plummets, right? Yeah, exactly. They're all gone. You know, you're like, no, really, we're here to work on the system. You know, they don't. So fitting in is important. So, you know, sometimes you'll be in buildings where you got a gentleman wear a jacket and tie because you're working on the executive floor and that's what they wear. Ask in advance what's the appropriate attire, right? Make sure you know that. Don't just show up with what you think is right. Be proactive in your communication. This is a balancing act. On the one hand, you want to ask lots of questions, right, and probe and get understanding. On the other hand, you want to avoid the label of needy. Anybody been labeled with needy? No, you don't have to answer that. Everybody have, what's a good picture of somebody who's needy on a project or on work? What's that? What does it look like? Come on. Okay, it's somebody who's asking unnecessary questions. It's somebody who's asking so many questions that by the time the person has answered them, they might as well have done that individual's work for them. That's the crossover line. It's like, wait a minute, I'm spending so much time explaining to you how to do this, I should just do it myself. Yeah, if you want to get on the bad side of a project manager, start behaving that way consistently, right? Don't do that. Don't do that. So strike your balance, listen to feedback. What are we mouthing over there, Elizabeth? No, nothing. Okay. All right. Manage expectations, no surprises. Begin with the end in mind. Right? Surprises are bad. Surprises are bad because they typically come with no time left. Right? And that's a cardinal sin for us. All right, if you flip your page over, we've got just a bunch of hoo-ha. So there's project setup stuff you got to go through. There's a project closeout process. We got to make sure we collect all our documents and get them uploaded into SID. All right, that's good. Right? Scott Madden doesn't require you to have a PMP or PMI. We don't mind if you do. That's great. If you're interested in pursuing something like that, please come and talk to Tess or Jennifer, I suppose. We are very willing to explore that with you, right? If that's something that you want to do, it certainly doesn't hurt. And then the last 6 slides on that page, those are examples of things like project schedules and work plans and issue logs. These are the kind of things that you're going to be asked to work on. I encourage you when you get on the project to find out first, what is that project manager or engagement director, what do they typically like? So Chris V has a set of issue logs, structures that he really likes. Find out what that is and use it. Stuart has the same thing. Right? Somebody's got a favorite kind of project plan layout that they like. Find out what that is and just adopt it. Okay? I would suggest that most of our project planning is really milestone driven. It's going to be milestones. It's going to be Gantt charts with milestones with a few tasks. That's probably going to be 80% of what we do. Right? And then the other 20% gets a lot more detailed. Rarely do we go to the level of linked tasks in like MS Project. Right, and I don't think we've ever done a resource-loaded kind of schedule. We haven't ever gone to that degree. So be ready to live with a lot of milestone planning. Okay. So we got 7 minutes left. Maybe I'll keep you over a little bit since I gave you a bio break. I asked this question a long time ago of the partners, and I asked, what's the most misunderstood part of a project as far as you were concerned? And they came back with some answers, so let me share these with you. The first one, and I think we've hinted at this already, is the most misunderstood part of the project is the client. What is the client actually going to do once the consulting team is gone? We get so wrapped up in the work itself, in the document, in the Excel analysis or whatever, that we forget, what is the client actually going to do when we've left? If they can't implement it, if they can't maintain it, have we really done them any good? Right? Okay, so that's one. Second one is focusing on time and budget instead of quality. I will admit that I am guilty of over-focusing on time, right? And simplifying and changing scope to fit in the allowable time, because my natural bent is I'd rather cycle faster. I think we do better if we get stuff done, even if it's not 100%, right? That may not always be the right answer, though. Right? The corollary to this is don't assume that that triangle is fixed, that your resource line is fixed per se. If you get jammed up on something, raise your hand early. It's amazing what we can do to bring more resources to bear on a particular aspect of a project, right? So don't get over focused on the time and the budget that we have. Focus on quality. What's really required to do a good job, an extraordinary job for our client, right? Thinking project plans are static. Right, that they're never going to change, that we're going to write them once, right, and that plan's going to last for 3 months. That's not the case, right? They will change, they will be updated, so be ready for that. You can't just plan on it being that way forever. And the last thing that they pointed to was sponsorship. And I guarantee you're going to end up at projects at some point where you have weak client sponsorship. right? It's just clear that the guy at the very top is either ambivalent about getting this work done or doesn't understand what he or she wants to get done on this project. So what you got to do is you got to go back up your Scott Madden chain. You got to make sure your project manager understands that this is going on and what you're perceiving is this lack of engagement, and that gets transmitted to your engagement director, because that's going to be their job to solve. It's not your job to solve. It's your job to point it out and raise your hand. It's their job to go solve that engagement issue, right? But that's crucial. If we lose engagement at that level, projects are gonna be really hard to complete the way you want to get them done. So let's talk about two more things and we'll be done. So far we kind of take the tack of everything's great, right? Big project, lots of fun, lots of things to do. But what happens when it goes wrong? What do? You're like, uh-oh.
Like wrong and regard to like something that we screwed up or something like just something happened?
Something happened. It's very clear I'm about to miss a milestone. I'm not going to deliver. Quality's not going to be there. My client left the meeting really, really angry.
Communication.
Be honest.
Yeah, there's actually one step to do in front of that. I encourage you to do this. Get your facts. What exactly is going on? It'll probably require you going back and looking at scope, right? It'll require you looking at some meeting notes quickly, right? Something has happened to have that kind of a change in a client expectation or the project. So let's get our baseline facts assembled first. Let's get all those and write them down. Don't presume that you can recall them, right, from memory. Write them down, right? The second thing is, and you all know this because you've worked in the real world, you got to analyze the problem and figure out what you think is going wrong. And then what's the second thing you add to that? What can we do? Yeah.
I was just going to say, come up with options.
Yes, exactly. Come up with options. Don't ever present a problem with no options, right? That's also known as being needy. Don't do that, right? Now, doesn't mean that your options have to, that those are the only ones, right? It may be the ones that are selected, but come with options. Get your options together, right? And then you got to communicate up, right? Go to your project manager, right? It's their job to absorb it and decide what to do with it. Don't jump and, oh, look, the partner's here today. I'm going to take this issue straight to the partner. Please don't do that. You're just going to make life really miserable for everybody else on the project. Follow the chain, go up, go to your project manager, communicate everything that you know with them, including your options, right, and make a plan. If it's really, really bad, like the client saying things like, I'm not sure I'm going to pay that invoice. This is absolutely not what we thought we were getting. You know, I'm going to have a big conversation with the CFO or whatever. You got to get this done like in 4 hours. You cannot sit on this overnight, right? You got to go. If it's 7 o'clock at night and you finally got your facts together, or 9 o'clock at night, you communicate. Get it out there, right? All right. And the last thing is, with your project manager, work out a plan. Decide what you're going to do and who's going to do what, and then stick to it. Okay. Typically, these things happen in the middle of projects. They don't happen at the front because nobody's taking it seriously. They don't happen at the end because we've worked everything out. It's in that middle phase where somebody in the client organization goes, hey, they're really going to do something. I'm not sure I like this, right? And crisis happens. So get ready. So when it goes wrong, right, get your facts, analyze, create options, take them up the chain. Okay, get an answer, make sure everybody knows. As Andy Flores likes to say, bad news never improves with age. Bad news never improves with age. So it's hard to come and say, this is messed up, right? I know it was on my work stream, but don't pack it in, right? Get that up on the table as quick as you can, okay? All right. So last couple of minutes, let's talk about success. Projects, what does success look like? Number one factor of success for a Scott Madden project is the client is thrilled or happy with the work. That is the number one. That is how we get repeat business. That's how we achieve the reputation in the industries that we work in, that we have. Our clients say consistently Scott Madden projects are better. I get a better result, faster, frequently less expensive than with anybody else. So it's part of our brand, right? Clients are really thrilled with the work. The second point, and this is interesting, is the work was excellent from a professional view. You may do an analysis that you have problems with. You might say, well, technically that's not correct. We should really use a different discount rate, right? The one that they're using really isn't the right one. Well, guess what? That's important, but it's not the most important thing, right? We want the work to be something that we're proud of professionally, but it's not the most important thing, and it's not worth making the client mad as long as we're confident they're still making a good decision. Does that make sense? It's really easy to get wrapped into the intellectual quality of the work as if that's who we're trying to please, and that's not the case. So sometimes you're going to have to detune that a little bit, right? And be very careful with it, right? We want to still have integrity in our work, but the objective is not to have the coolest piece of intellectual ware out there. That's not the objective, okay? Project was completed on time. We got it done within budget. And the fifth one, the consulting team was happy or thrilled with the experience. How many millennials we have in the room? Okay, this is going to be really hard. You ready? Listening? This is not about you. It's really hard, right? I come from a different generation where that was trained into me, right? For you guys, it's different because everything about your life is customized. It's customized to exactly the way that you want it. Not these projects. These projects are about our clients, right? And what they need to get done, right? So you may be really unhappy at points, right? You may be really unhappy with some hours that you're working. You may be unhappy with, oh, look at all that hard work I invested in, it just got scrapped because the project moved a different direction, right? You may be personally really unhappy, but if we're hitting those first, second, and third objectives, then the company, Scott Madden, is happy and our clients are happy. So just challenge yourself when you're getting frustrated, because you will be frustrated, I guarantee it, right? How much of this is about me and how much of this is about the client, okay? All right, so I think my time is up. I think I have said what I needed to say. Questions? Comments? No, come on. You guys are talkative.
I had questions for you, that's all.
I hope not. Okay, so one of the first things you're going to start doing after all this training is done is you're going to start asking around the office who is really good at project management, right? And start finding out who those individuals are and start getting a relationship with them. Start networking with those folks to learn what they do and how they do it. Okay, that's your number one go-do out of this. All right, and with that, we're finished, and I think we're on break time, right?
Yeah.
All right, thank you.